Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Star Watch, which is a weekly astrological transit report. My name is Jane. Thank you so much for being here. So let's go ahead and dive right in because today is very exciting. We have a full moon in Capricorn. How's everybody feeling? I hope you're all feeling great. Although I know this can be a pretty intense full moon. I'm being a little facetious. You know, it's an interesting full moon because there are so many planets involved. Here we have the moon over here in Capricorn. It is conjunct Pluto, right? It's not an exact conjunction, 6 degrees apart, but it is still a conjunction nonetheless. And then we have the sun over here in Cancer with Mercury. Mercury just a few degrees off, Mercury moving really, really, really fast. Now, one of the ways, so I'm a big believer that house placement is always so much more important than like the sign placement. Now, the sign can definitely give it a flavor and a personality, but the house placement is really going to tell you where in your life you're being affected. So if you really want to know the area where this full moon is going to affect you, take a look at your natal chart, and you can use whichever house system you feel the most comfortable with, and take a look at which house the Capricorn and Cancer axis takes place. Like, for example, for me as a Libra rising, it's happening in my 10th house and my 4th house. Some of you, it may be your 2nd and 8th. Some others, it may be your 11th and 5th. I don't know. But this is really going to tell you where this is affecting you. Now, the reason why I'm saying that and the reason why that's important to know where and which areas of your life are being affected is because this represents significant transformation with this Pluto involvement here. And we are changing rapidly as individuals. Big and important areas of our lives are changing rapidly. Our careers are changing, our desires to be in relationships are evolving, our financial situations are changing, our friendship groups are changing. And this really says to me, when I look at this as an astrologer, I say this is like a point of no return. And we're kind of getting, now again, I've said this multiple times, and I'm going to keep saying it week after week after week, because it's important to remember that every time the moon comes through once a month through the zodiac signs of Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, the moon is activating Pluto and Saturn and Neptune. And we're getting this like huge opportunity here. It's like this window of time to really close things out and bring things to an end that truly no longer serve us. And when Saturn moves into Pisces, that's going to be accentuated even that much more. And we're going to have a few years ahead of us where we have this huge transition. It's like an era of our life. Okay, we need to understand that we're operating in eras. Okay, it's not just like, oh, this week in astrology. There's always a bigger picture to it. This is my Sagittarius in the 3rd house. Of course, I have to always talk about the big picture. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like if you don't see the big picture, it's not going to make sense. But this is a point of no return, this full moon. And it's really coming out to say, hey, everybody, like this structure, right, being in Capricorn, this structure, this boundary, this world that you have created, this set of rules, this set of laws, this set of beliefs, all of these things that you hold in very high regard are starting to slip through the cracks and are starting to lose their significance. They're starting to lose their importance. They're starting to lose their hold on you. And you're going to have to release that. You're going to have to transform, as Pluto indicates. But transformation is a highly destructive process, right? We have to deconstruct in order to reconstruct the new world. And I'm speaking, I guess, a little bit as an as above, so below kind of way. There's definitely a global component. If you're paying attention at all, you can definitely see that. But even just in your own individual world, you can probably feel that. It's a point of no return. You can't ever go back. You can't ever go back to those patterns and to those types of people. And you can't ever go back to that financial situation again. You can't ever go back to that abusive thing or whatever. It's just like you simply cannot. It's like the vibration that you're at now just absolutely cannot mesh with those old vibrations. There's a very clear, distinct, like kind of two vibrations hitting up against one another, clashing so much that they actually reject one another. And so you're moving forward, and I'm not saying this is going to be hugely obvious in that some event is going to occur today at the full moon. Doesn't necessarily mean that. It's just that it's a feeling. It's just a feeling. And of course, we're in Cancer season, so our feelings are just like super on point right now. And our gut instincts and our, divine feminine intuition is really kicking in and saying, look, you have to trust this guidance. You have to trust this feeling, because if you don't, and if you can't, you're just going to find yourself hitting your head against the wall and not even realizing why, or not understanding why, or how to get out of it. And no one wants to be there. We want to be progressing forward. I was really thinking about this before I turned on the camera today. It's a very interesting time for us to have big planets like Pluto and Saturn and Neptune all hanging out in the last 10 degrees of the last zodiac signs, right? Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, these are the last 3 zodiac signs. And these big power players, these big hefty planets hanging out in those latter degrees. So they're all going to be coming to an ending, and Neptune is moving closer and closer to Aries, which it will enter through 25 and 26. Same with Saturn, moving closer and closer. And then Pluto is making his big transition through 23 and 24, moving out of Capricorn, back and forth between Capricorn and Aquarius. So there's this massive, precursor to a massive shift, is the only way that I can really describe it. And we are being breadcrumbed one day at a time, one astrological event at a time, toward our new life, toward our new path. And I don't want to use magical words like destiny right now, because I don't know that it feels like destiny. It feels like real conscious choices. It is a destiny in a way that it is an effect of your choices. But right now we're making the choices, because the old momentum from the old life that we had seems to be coming to a close with these coming into these latter degrees. And as that closes out, we then kind of begin to set forth a new wave, a new force of momentum in a whole new direction with a whole new reality for ourselves. And it probably is going to happen with one small decision at a time. So if you decide to go look for a new apartment, or you decide to get on a dating app and start meeting people, or you decide to move across the country, or you decide to start that little website as a side hustle, it's just these little decisions that are actually pushing us forward and forward and forward into an entirely new way of life. And it is a dramatic way to describe this full moon, but it is a dramatic full moon. It is an aspect, after all, with the Uranus North Node over here in Taurus and the South Node over here in Scorpio. We can see this blue rectangle. There's a trine and a sextile, a trine and a sextile with all of these planets, but specifically the moon and the sun. Pluto is just a little too far, but he's still included in here as well. And this kind of rectangular aspect with the Uranus North Node and the South Node, it's like a decision point. And the good news is that you have these positive aspects, trines and sextiles, which are harmonious. And it should flow, right? The transition from our fears and our feelings of being trapped under things, like we have certain circumstances that we can't overcome, right? That's kind of the energy of Scorpio. It's it's always being buried under things, it's always feeling like it's got this big weight down and it's in the dark and all that. And here's Taurus over here, kind of with that blossoming effect. And so we make that decision to decide to start to blossom. And it means getting out of our comfort zone with Uranus, and especially as Mars is making his way closer and closer to his conjunction, which will happen on August 1st. So we're a few weeks away from that, but we're building up to it. Mars comes into this conjunction on the same, a couple days after Jupiter goes retrograde over here in Aries. So there's this kind of building up to the blossoming and up to the decisions that are going to make you uncomfortable. And I'm going to tell you what, the transitions that you're making, they're not going to be successful right away, like boom, out of the gate immediately. You're not going to see the effects or the payback like within a couple of weeks. There's a time factor at play. And Taurus always will take its time. It's a leisurely. We have to remember the leisurely quality of Taurus. Because one of the things that I've observed, and I've mentioned this a couple of times, well, I don't know if I've mentioned it in my weekly astrology reading or if I've just mentioned it in private readings, I'm not sure. But sometimes it all just blends together. But one thing I've noticed about this Uranus to Taurus transit is there is a lot of urgency to make change. But the resistance to that is even amplified that much more. And that's been kind of something that's just sort of sunk in as I've observed other people, people coming to me for private readings. They're like, oh man, I really want to make this change. I want to change my career. I want to change this. I want to change departments. I want to go here. I want to go here. But there's nothing stopping them except for themselves. And it's just like the amount of justifications and the amount of rationalizations to stay put is just like off the charts. Now, some people have made changes, but even with the changes that you have made, it's like, has anything really changed? Have you changed? Like, you may go from LA to New York, but or if you're the same person, then nothing's changed and your life will probably just be the same. So the real change is more internal, and it has a lot to do with your internal sense of value, what you contribute, what you build, the value you bring to the world, and the value, that you offer in terms of helping people on their own journeys. This Mars is going to activate, I'm going to call it a fire under our butt, which I kind of was saying a lot with Mars through Aries. But now with this Uranus, there's going to be high energy. I love Mars-Uranus transits. I just got to tell you, it can be a little clumsy sometimes. So just FYI, there is a lot of volatility here. Again, I'm not super optimistic about the markets over the next couple of weeks. Like, I don't know. I was kind of hoping that the Venus conjunct Uranus would be really positive for the markets, but it did not end up that way. It actually really tanked. So Mars coming into contact with Uranus, I'm like, yeah, we'll probably either see another dip of some kind, or it could be some other kind of event that may affect the markets too. Just not super optimistic about that in general, but there's still high energy. So for us to be able to get up out of bed in the morning and make things happen and have that sustaining quality, it's like working hard and working passionately and working with focus with high levels of energy to specifically set forth a lot of things in motion. It's going to set yourself up for success really far down the line. So just the next few weeks, I don't know that you can really perceive the effects that your actions are going to have, but your actions are going to have incredible effects that will have longevity. All right, because especially as Mars makes his way in August into Gemini and makes his way, because he's going to be slowing way down in Gemini, doing a retrograde in Gemini at the very latter degrees in October. Okay, so he's going to be doing his whole thing over here in Gemini. And this is kind of our last chance before that retrograde to attach ourselves to something meaningful, to attach ourselves to something that we are passionate about enough that we can persevere through an adversarial energy like a Mars retrograde. Because I'm going to tell you what, this Mars retrograde is going to be all over the place. Gemini energy is mutable air. And it's all about curiosity and flexibility and experimentation and making all sorts of different connections and going here and here and here and here and here. And there's just like a lot of movement there. And so we tend to get distracted, or we tend to, go after things that are shiny. You know, I always say don't get distracted by shiny objects, but we will in some way. And it could be good, I guess, because we'll be experimenting and maybe we learn some new things that we can incorporate into something, but it's still a very distracting time. And if we don't really take advantage of Mars in Taurus, which is setting things on a stable, persistent course, then Mars and Gemini is just going to delay everything and make everything kind of confusing. And there may be some cool creative projects that come out of it, but likely they will fizzle out, or they won't have longevity, or they may not succeed or launch in the way that we would really love something to launch. So this is going to be a fantastic time for us in our overall growth and our path, right? And the choices that we're making. So take advantage of this time, okay? Full moon with endings, but also redirecting our focus toward things we care about. Like I was saying last week, Taurus, it's really hard to get excited with a Mars in Taurus if we're not genuinely excited about it. It's hard to fake stuff. It's hard to dedicate time toward the things that just don't light ourselves on fire. It's really, really hard. It's hard to do the mundane things because not necessarily all the mundane things are aligned with our grand vision. And so we may feel that the everyday aspects of life are somewhat distracting because sometimes the only thing we want to do is the thing we want to do. If you're like a painter, it's like the only thing I want to do is paint. Like I don't want to cook my dinner, you know, or the only thing I want to do is, you know, like go out in my garden. I don't want to do my laundry. You know, it's just whatever it is for you. We all have our things that make our heart beat a little bit faster and that take us out of time. And then we all have the things that like we're just dragging our feet doing it. And we're going to be noticing that contrast for sure over the next few weeks. Now, Venus right now is in an interesting aspect. She's in a square with Neptune, but she's in a trine with Saturn as she's coming through the Uranian decan of Gemini. Now, she's not super strong right now. She's scoring at a -5. Another reason why I'm not super optimistic about the markets. And actually, as she moves into Cancer this week, because she's going to be moving in on Monday, you know, she is improving a little bit with that transition into Cancer, which will be good. She'll be coming off of her aspect with Saturn at that time. Yeah, she's kind of going to be going up in score. Saturn is going to be decreasing a little bit. Saturn's been kind of the ruling planet for a little while. We'll kind of notice him at the top here at a +8. So Saturn and Venus are going to be kind of switching places over the next week. And that will be good for relationships. It will be good for our finances. It will be good for our just overall general enjoyment of our lives. But for right now, over the next few days, you may feel a tightening of something. You may incur a little bit of expense. You may have a difficult time communicating with people, especially because we have Mercury here involved with this full moon. But as Mercury comes into that conjunction with the Sun and comes into the latter degrees of Cancer, which of course is the Neptunian degree set of Cancer, it's going to be coming into a trine with Neptune. Now, of course, we like trines. Okay, trines are positive, harmonious aspects. So when we have positive aspects with Neptune, it can get very dreamy and highly creative, musical, poetic, very romantic. And there may be a desire to communicate a great deal of feelings. My question is, will those things be reciprocated? That's the question. Especially as Venus is still in Gemini, kind of in a difficult spot. She's here with Saturn. You know, sometimes we want to take on a more positive spin on things, but then also we have to be very realistic about things too. And when I say realistic, I don't mean negative. I just mean an acknowledgement of where we are. And there may be some people this week that just kind of put their fingers in their ears and are like, la, 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 I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to acknowledge my current state. You know, I don't want to look at my bank account, or I don't want to like look at the fact that my partner is crazy, or I don't want to look at the fact that I hate this job. I don't want to look at that, because if I look at it, it means I have to do something about it. Of course, full moon in Capricorn. And the avoidance there avoiding the hefty stuff for the sake of the things that make us feel good. Now, I'm not saying to not focus on the things that make you feel good. I'm not saying you can't be poetic and you can't be romantic about your life. You absolutely can, and maybe you should to a degree. But you also, there's a difference between choosing a path that feels good and that feels right versus avoiding something, right? There's two very different things. Avoiding actually builds its own momentum. And we don't want the thing that we are avoiding to build momentum, because if we do that, it becomes problematic later on. It's like if you have a leak in your house, you can't just like let it keep dripping, right? Because then all of a sudden you're going to have all these problems. Like, you have to address it. You have to hit it head on, and you have to be able to look something in the face and say, okay, I'm going to deal with you now. You deal with it, you get it done, and then you move on, and you can focus on the things that feel good, the things that feel better. We do have this Jupiter coming into, now Jupiter is still at a +4. He's been at a +4 for a while, kind of hanging out around that area. He's doing okay. He's slowing way down. He's getting ready to do his retrograde on the 28th. We have Chiron's also very, very slow in the sky, doing his retrograde on the full moon is on 13th. When's Chiron? The 19th. Sorry, I was thinking the 16th. Chiron is going retrograde on the 19th. So we have a Chiron retrograde and then a Jupiter retrograde at the end of the month. So we're going to be feeling that Aries energy kind of really pulling back. Now, one of the things that I'm sensing, okay, this Chiron through Aries has brought about this huge wave of personal healing. And you see that all over the internet. You see that with a whole bunch of people. Like, now the word trigger is like a totally normal word. We talk about more openly our trauma. We talk more openly about things, especially in like a dating or relationship scenario. We are more willing to be transparent about those things because it provides a stronger foundation for relationships if we can be honest about kind of why we are the way we are a little bit. Now, I'm not saying you have to be like emotionally slutty or anything, but I think that's changing. As Chiron is now sitting at like these middle degrees, right, 15, 16 degrees, he's going to be doing a retrograde over that 15th degree of Aries. I sense that there are people that are going to, what I want to say is, move on from their healing journey. It doesn't mean you're done or you're complete, but it's no longer going to be something that you put out there so much, because that healing is actually moving further and further in your past, to the point where you don't have to lead with it anymore. You don't have to explain anything anymore, because it's just, I don't know, I think you've reached a point of wholeness. You've reached a point of completion. And this retrograde will likely surface final things for you to really close a particularly potent healing chapter of your life. Especially as this Jupiter retrograde is going to dip back into these last degrees of Pisces again, coming into a conjunction with Neptune again. This is the Plutonic decan of Pisces. So this is like real endings. Jupiter kind of coming in and saying, all right, you get to have one final opportunity to to let the stuff surface emotionally through Pisces, to let that stuff surface and to heal it or to love it enough so that you can move forward with your life and with your mission, with whatever this Mars conjunct Uranus North Node stuff is for you. You can move forward and not be bogged down by all of the emotional trauma. Okay, so this is, again, an opportunity. It's an open door. And because we had recently the sun coming into that square with Chiron, and we have Mercury coming to that conjunction, he's coming off of the square with Chiron right now. The emotional component of Cancer, certainly making it very clear about what those things are. And I don't know that any of you have any question about what's left inside of you that still needs to be healed. I mean, I know that the healing journey is like an infinite thing, and we always continue with that. And there's so much that continues to surface over and over, but it does come to a point where things stop surprising you. It comes to a point where things stop becoming hindrances and where they start becoming platforms that you can leverage, right? You get to leverage your life experience. You get to leverage your joys and your lessons and your successes and your failures into something more lucrative. Now, remember the monthly readings that I did for July? Lucrative was like the word of the month. The decisions and the pathways and the steps that we are taking are leading us toward lucrative outcomes, unless you are succumbing to the fear, which is South Node in Scorpio. If you are succumbing to the fear and you are allowing yourself to get bogged down, that's the only way that this isn't going to work for you. And I'm sure you guys know a lot of people who are really living in their victimhood. I think we're seeing a lot of that in the collective right now, which is really unfortunate, but it makes it even that much more important for us to stand firm, to stand in our light, and to have that courage to live what we feel is our life purpose, and to truly embody what we feel is meant for us in this life in an unadulterated way, not meaning it's not rooted in trying to prove ourselves, or not rooted in trying to be successful in the, more modern sense of like having a lot of money and the nice cars and the big house. I mean, you can still have all those things, sure, but if that's not what really feels successful for you, then you don't have to define success in that way. And to truly embody what you want your life to be, and to make it possible for others, right? Because by doing that, you are creating space for others to do that too. Okay, so it's a big full moon. It's a big week. It's a big day. Just hearing some weird things going on in my house. So I hope you guys, take this opportunity to really think about where you want your life to go. Okay? All right, you guys, I love you. I hope you have an amazing week, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.